All right, so we are starting now. So thanks for coming to my talk. I will be talking about EventStorming today. And before we start, organizers asked all the speakers to incorporate this slide into their presentation. So it's super easy. So please go to the sli.do, not CLI, SLI, and the code GeeCON, the room 12, and you can post your question there and give feedback as well. I rate my talk. So first of all, I would like to tell you what this talk is not about. So this talk is not about how to become an expert in event storming in 40 minutes. So I know it's impossible because I actually run event storming, run training in event storming, architecture, domain-driven design, and other topics. My name is Vadzim. I'm a co-owner and instructor at TrainingTech, where we actually run all of those trainings. And I work as well as a hands-on architect at Apotek One. Apotek One is the biggest pharmacy chain in Norway, and it's a part of Phoenix Group, and the Phoenix Group is presented in Poland as Pharma Polska. Beside of my work, or outside of my work, I have a family. I enjoy nature, skiing, playing the guitar and singing, fishing, making some goodies for my family, and I try to do all of that with my family. So today my goal is to show how event storming can be useful for developers, because it's a developer conference, right? It's not a conference for managers. That's why I would like to present event storming in a way that is understandable and digestible by developers, and give my talk from a developer's perspective. And I'll do my best to inspire you to use event storming when you're back at work. By the way, I'll wrap up with two interesting stories coming from my previous event storming sessions. So if you have time, and so please, maybe you can remind me to do that if I forget. So first of all, let me give you some context so we'll be on the same page. So why we need event storming at all? Now I need a bit of interaction with you. So I will ask you 3 questions. So the first question, how many of you agree that many people work on projects they actually don't understand? Yeah, I see quite many hands. Yes, and this is very true. Yeah, because we as developers try to focus on very specific part of the projects, sometimes without understanding the a whole scope of the system. For example, we can focus on some integrations, maybe on specific part of implementation of specific part of the business process, without understanding the whole thing. It doesn't contribute to good systems. One more question. How many of you agree that systems often contain wrong developers' assumptions about functions and dependencies rather than knowledge of domain experts? Who agrees? Yes? Many hands as well. So this again, because of lack of communication, lack of time, sometimes we need to take decisions in smaller groups. Maybe in a group of technical specialists, in a technical team, maybe with your neighbor colleague, and maybe only by yourself. Which means that these decisions about end user behavior will slowly drift to production. So you just make some assumptions whether end users will like this or that, and you make a decision and it will go to production. Basically, your assumption will go to production. And the last one, did you experience the following? One architect spends a lot of time on gathering requirements from different people and then assumes that developers will quickly understand what they will implement. Did you experience that? Yes, some of you, maybe some of you were those architects. Maybe you are currently that architect, like a person who knows everything. This is very good for your salary, of course, but not very good for your company. Because what can happen with that architect? That architect may disappear. What will the next architect do? Probably the same, right? So, and I have a real life story because I was that next architect, and I had only 3 months to catch up on one project, and I was just solely relying on documentation left by another architect who left the company. So it was a really hard task for me. And I'm not saying that architect wasn't good. So that architect was a really smart and good guy. However, I'm just saying that there is something wrong with the approach when one person just gathers all the requirements. So what can help us? Let's go through this list real quick. So discovering implicit dependencies on the business level. And here I mean something that is not maybe documented or statically defined in your code base, but for example, market trends, third-party services, user behavior, things like that. So it would be nice to know it by the entire team, right? Next one, transferring the knowledge between important people, like a domain expert, developers, etc. I think it's like obvious that transferring the knowledge between like key stakeholders, like domain experts and developers, is essentials for our systems and for understanding and collaboration improve. Discovering the most important events and problems, like different bottlenecks, legal restrictions, maybe GDPR issues in advance before you start coding. And solving business problems rather than blindly implementing requirements. So I have seen many times when developers get tasks from the business, like, please implement a new functionality. I need another window where I can import my Excel file, then you will calculate something and maybe send to another system. And I always ask the question, okay, what problem am I solving? Could it be solved better? Why just are you telling me what I will do? Maybe let's have a talk and understand the problem first. But unfortunately, sometimes, or maybe in your case often, so you have to just implement those requirements without have a good talk with the business. All right, so maybe you start thinking, okay, so Vadzim is too abstract. We have seen and heard many times about good corporate culture, knowledge sharing, things like that. We know this is working, but could it be closer to the code? I'll do my best. And imagine, what if you had some class from your domain model before you write the code? So you have this like a list of classes you will implement. What if you had knowledge about your future API? Maybe it's a REST API, maybe the most important public methods in your domain model, and you have it in advance before writing the code. What if you had knowledge about end users, different roles that will use your system? Then, what if you had information that helps those end users make their decisions? What if you had knowledge about important business rules that you will write in your code? What if you had all the events, especially it's quite important for event-driven system, that you will code? And what if you had information about future system that you will integrate with? And finally, what if you had knowledge about some questions nobody can answer right now? Then you can imagine that you have like all of those clusters together, grouped together, and then you had knowledge about your future services. So in terms of domain-driven design, we usually talk about bounded context. So for you who are maybe not familiar with domain-driven design, you can just see it as your future microservices. And would it be nice to have it before you start coding? Who would like to have it before start coding? Many hands. I would love to have it before starting coding. And just imagine that this can be done in hours instead of those boring meetings where you can sit and maybe some remote meetings where you can sit and see some of your colleagues just do like this while others talking. This can be done in hours. All of this knowledge about your APIs, events, about your bounded context, your services in hours. Okay, sounds like a magic. So, however, that's why I would like to talk about it today, because I'm like a strong believer in this approach, and I have used this methodology multiple times, and I get always impressed by the results just after a few hours. So let's understand EventStorming a bit better. So what is EventStorming? EventStorming is a workshop where you bring together all the interested parties in order to run a massive collaborative exploration. So it runs for hours instead of days, weeks, or months. So you can see it as well as the most effective meeting you can have in your life. Some examples of real people. So you can see people are working together, having fun. So by the way, so those are real people, not AI generated. And yeah, so that's the example of EventStorming. Main elements of EventStorming, you don't need to memorize all of them right now, just to give you a picture, and then you come back to it and understand it a bit better. So I have a list like why we should use EventStorming. So again, let's go through this very quickly. First of all, it's faster and more enjoyable than traditional methods. Many people just stand in the same room, work together. More enjoyable than sitting in boring meetings. Helps developers and business people get to know each other. So for example, in my case, I knew some people, I knew some faces, maybe I met them, said hi in the canteen, nothing else. So then after a couple of these meetings, so I know more colleagues in my company. Helps find a common language between developers and business people. By the way, who is familiar with domain-driven design? What is the name for this common language? Yeah, please. Ubiquitous language, exactly. So EventStorming helps with domain-driven design to find ubiquitous language. Helps discover important questions before writing the code. Before writing the code, I just always like to emphasize it, because finding the answers along the way while you're just working for many months is just much harder. And helps get a strategic design, in other words, define boundaries and their dependencies. Okay, so we are done with this part, how to run EventStorming. Just let's dive into it. Due to time constraints, I'll focus on the most crucial parts. However, you will get like a common understanding of how to do it. So first of all, we start with invitations. I have to admit that many people who actually get inspired by EventStorming, they try to focus on running it. However, invitations are 50% of your success. And many people just underestimate the importance of invitations, and they say, oh, we failed EventStorming. So why are invitations so important? So first of all, we need to try to find as many people as you can who are important for the exploration of your domain or process or whatever. So you basically need to find two groups of people who have answers and who have questions. If you find only one group of people, so probably your meeting, your workshop won't be so effective. So you need to always have those two groups of people. One more, some of them won't show up because we have families, we have sicknesses, things may happen. And usually, so if you invite maybe 15 people, some of them won't show up, and you just need to do something about that. That's why always think about backups. If you invite domain experts, there should be at least like a 2 domain expert in some area. There should be clear who will be a facilitator. So this talk as well about how to be kind of a facilitator. This is very important role. So facilitator is basically responsible for the workshop preparation, explanation of what to do, management of long conversation, because sometimes you will have to politely interrupt people, being full of energy. So you have to be like energetic and enthusiastic. So like keeping the session engaging, and so participants are more like likely to be motivated and involved. So if you're, let's say, a developer, very introvert, in this case, I would suggest to work on your like soft skills, because you will have to communicate with people a lot. And give the context to the audience, not just saying that, okay, we will explore this system. So you should give the boundaries, so the audience will understand what we will explore. So when we are done with invitations, so we have those 2 groups of people, we go to the room setup. So what do we need to have in our room? First of all, we need to have a long and straight wall, which means like, depending on your scope, it should be like at least 6-8 meters long, without any obstacles like windows, pillars. There should be just flat surface, because you need to need to make an impression that you are working on the endless surface. So seats are not easily available, which means that when people are working together, they should stand and interact. So it shouldn't happen when someone just grabs a seat or and just a chair and just sits and working and just working like this and showing something. No, it shouldn't happen. Next thing, it should be enough space to move. It should be comfortable for people. It should be plenty of sticky notes and markers for everyone. So be sure you have them. Enough healthy food and beverages, so you just don't make people starving. A flip chart or anything else as a legend. Just a reminder of what sticky note, which sticky notes note means what. And it should be as well like a timer visible to everyone that helps manage the session phases effectively. You can use phone or maybe timer or digital board or anything else that just suits your best. So all the phases of EventStorming should be time boxed. I will get to it later. And we start, the first phase is called chaotic exploration. So it's really chaotic, which means that it's intentionally unstructured. So it's all about capturing as much information as possible without worrying about order. So we just give people those orange sticky notes, and orange sticky note means a domain event domain event is something that has happened, which means that it should be written in the past tense. And we have like one more rule. It should be understandable by others. So please just take your time a bit, just and write it in the way so others will understand it. And then everybody works on their own. So there is no interaction with facilitator or between each other. Everyone is trying just to grab everything from their heads and move to the board without keeping the order or thinking about the time at all. So just the like original knowledge. So we just try to capture everything that what's basically in your head. Okay, so this is chaotic exploration, and usually it takes 10-15 minutes. Sometimes people say, "Oh, 10 minutes, it's so short." Actually, after 10 minutes, people usually don't have anything to add. Why is it useful? So it's the first step to find common vocabulary for the participants. This is where your ubiquitous language, common language appears. Everyone's knowledge starts to be visible to others, and it's often surprising to see how much events come up. Usually people think that, okay, so there are some things I haven't considered before. And most of the events will be actually events in your code. So this is why it's important for developers. One practical tip: write domain events so others can read. So I mentioned it. So when we are done with the chaotic exploration, now we need to make an order of it. And we basically need to organize all the events in chronological order and remove duplicates. There are some techniques how we do that. I will just mention two of them. The first one is the pivotal events. Pivotal events are the most important events in your business flow that are, for example, hard to revert, such as, let's say, dispute closed. When dispute gets closed, it's just hard to revert it. And usually you just mark all those events with like a yellow tape. And you can use as well swim lanes, because sometimes some of your events don't depend on each other, and some part of your process can go just in parallel. And you just can draw, or maybe without drawing, you just put a group of events, let's say a bit higher, and a group of events a bit below. Yeah. So this is we call it swim lanes. So why is it useful? So why do we need to group all the events and make an order of it? So pivotal events and swim lanes can help you identify service boundaries in the future. So basically, those pivotal events in the future will be pointers to your service boundaries. And understanding of the system gets better, and many questions arise. Some of them cannot be answered, and turn to hotspots. So I will be talking about hotspots just in a second. So here people work in groups, and the practical tip is to define like dynamic groups. So let's say you just divide all the audience in 3, maybe 4 groups, and then you mix them in which phase, so they get acquainted with every part of the business process, and they communicate with each other. They maybe don't agree, and this is where hotspots arise. So hotspot, those red sticky notes, usually represent unclear topics or questions that cannot be easily answered or resolved just at the very moment. And you just stick them, because otherwise, if you continue talking and discussing, then you will just drain your time, and then you will end up with a lot of things that just still not done. Yeah, but you need to catch up, and you need to proceed working together. That's why you add hotspots. When we are done with this phase, the next step is identifying actors and systems. So as you can see, we add like two types of sticky notes. The first one is actors or people or roles. Those are yellow small sticky notes that represent end users and who interact with the system. Yeah, usually you ask your domain experts about who will interact with the system, and then again, working in groups, you just place them, and again, it will be additional knowledge for you as a developer. And external systems, those are systems that you will have to integrate with. So this phase gives you even more knowledge about who will use your system, and the external systems that will show integrations you will have to implement. And just based on my experience, this part usually leads to even more unanswered questions, which means hotspots, even more hotspots, and which is good, because we want to have all of them before we write the code, right? Not along the way. Some practical tip: don't force participants to draw humans. Even the book about EventStorming just suggests those like one human, just simple human, then human with crown, and others. So just believe me, some people don't have that good drawing skills, and in my case, I usually suggest having just drawing a letter and a circle, like an avatar you usually see when you don't have a picture. Now, we've covered the essential phases, and it's time for the explicit walkthrough. So what is explicit walkthrough? So you choose the narrator who will tell the story from the beginning to the end. We'll see why it's useful, and while the narrator is telling the story, we as well place hotspots and opportunities. So you already know what hotspot is, and the opportunity, just one more like a green sticky note that actually highlights some areas for improvement, maybe potential value additions, just ways to enhance user retention, something that is also important to know. And so why is it useful? When a person is telling the story, then the whole group can listen to it and can verify the truthfulness of the entire story. Because since before we were working in groups, maybe you have some gaps. Okay, so we need to fill the gaps. And common understanding becomes even better. And again, based on my experience, so this part usually results in more sticky notes, like maybe some domain events missed, again, hotspots and opportunities. And as a facilitator, you need to ensure that the process is fully understood and that any gaps are addressed. Because sometimes the audience can just sit and listen. But as a facilitator, you should always just, to listen to what the narrator is saying and try to help the audience to catch those small gaps. And after it, you may end up with like too many hotspots, for example, 20 hotspots. So what will you do? How to address all of them? And that's why sometimes you need error voting. So you just use those small blue sticky notes, and you ask everyone to cast maybe like 2, maybe 4 votes. And then you have in the end, you have a backlog of the hotspots that need to be addressed first. Good. And we can say that a big picture event storming done. So after that, you can wrap up the meeting depending on your scope, and you will see how much knowledge just after maybe 2-3 hours the whole group has. You will get impressed. Just believe me. You can just try, and you will see the result. So some useful tips. All the phases should be time boxed. Otherwise, the time will go, and the people will say, "Oh, we are tired, and event storming sucks. It just doesn't work." Not all domain events with the same text are duplicates. So when you remove some duplicates, you should try to ask people, okay, what do you mean by that? And sometimes people, you will be surprised by the answer. Sometimes even sticky notes look the same, even the text the same, they may not mean the same. Long conversations should be politely interrupted and replaced by hotspots. So sometimes, just a very one practical tip, I see people just start talking, and they just can't come to any agreement. And I usually say that that everybody has right to be wrong, and let's just write a hotspot, and then after that we can discard it. And now we'll continue with other parts. And never use technical terms like, "Oh, this is where my aggregate root will be," or "Oh, we are just is about to define a new bounded context." So when you say it to your domain experts, then it can be, they can just disengage, and it won't be so effective meeting after that. So please refrain from using technical terms while talking with domain experts. And as a facilitator, you should be prepared for personal issues, like, as I mentioned, long discussions, so you need to interrupt people, and, for example, some person dominating others. As well, you should be very careful with that, and maybe mix the groups, mix people in the groups, and things like that. So you should be prepared for personal issues. And discuss only visible things. That's important as well. Some people just tend to maybe use their laptops, notebooks, just make some notes. Again, as a facilitator, you should watch out for those things. And when it happens, you should just make it clear that we are working on this surface today. So we don't use any external devices, any external things. Right, so that's very important. Otherwise, this knowledge will be just will disappear. Before going further, it's important to resolve the most important hotspots. So now, if you have a backlog of them, you should have maybe a couple of meetings and try to resolve them. And then the next step is process modeling. This is where like 3 more sticky notes appear. Policies, commands, and read models. So command is user intention, basically. Usually expressed as a verb. So if you have an event, for example, dispute closed, so you may have a command, close dispute. And this is, as you remember, will be your future APIs. Policy is the important business rules that we should be aware of. For example, you have a domain event, like accept dispute resolution, and you may have a policy, like whenever user accepts resolution without any comment, we should automatically close the dispute or resolve the dispute. In this case, this knowledge as well can be useful. And the read model is something about information needed for end users to make their decisions. For example, you may have a domain expert may mention that in order to have a command like resolve the dispute, I need information about the order, I need information about the conversation, and as a technical person, as a developer, you may think, oh, this is actually where actually my service will need information maybe from other services, and maybe I will use some patterns like a CQRS. So read models are as well quite useful. So commands heavily contribute to your future API design. Read models can help with UI-related decisions and using some patterns like CQRS, and policies may turn to important domain logic in your code. As well, good knowledge, it's good to have this knowledge before writing the code. Then you will have next meeting is to where you find your bounded context. So you just try to evaluate vocabulary, roles, business scenarios, just how domain events are grouped together, your pivotal events as well, and you just usually use like a pen and you draw the boundaries. This is more like a technical meeting, which is good. This is where your bounded context born. So, and you will basically understand what services you will have. Practical tip, you can as well invite some domain experts because they may also help to define bounded context. And the very last meeting, technical meeting, is to discover aggregates. So unfortunately, I don't have time just to explain what aggregate is. I can only say that this is like the most important classes in your domain model that represents consistency boundary. So whenever you call some public method on the aggregate, so usually it represents the consistency boundary. So after that, everything should be consistent, all the changes. So if you're practicing domain-driven design as well, you just evaluate all the related events, life cycles, and you can just you can find your aggregates. So aggregates are the most important classes in your domain model, and practical tip, try to avoid identifying too big aggregates. Just think about to have like a small enough aggregates. And that's basically it. So you're done with event storming. So you have all of those before you write any single line of code in hours. However, you may still have the following questions. Maybe they just start popping up in your heads. Will EventStorming give me 100% solution always? No, EventStorming is not a golden hammer. However, it's an affordable good hammer. So I suggest you to try this because it's so cheap. It takes a few hours. Does EventStorming work only for new projects? Not at all. So it can be incredibly helpful for ongoing projects, maintenance, and even process reviews. For example, in my company, we reviewed the development and the release process. Nice. And after that, we actually came to common understanding that something that was documented actually can't work for all projects. And surprisingly, we got 20 hotspots after that. Even documentation was there, so people just didn't understand so how it will work in our company. Is EventStorming about any hard rules? Not at all. Feel free to add read models, for example, during the explicit walkthrough phase, or maybe policies. So if common sense tells you that it's time to edit, just edit. And as a facilitator, you create an illusion that everything is under control. However, it's not. So before any EventStorming session, I, as a facilitator, don't know anything like about what will happen. I have just very a clear board, and my expectation is that I will create a structure and people just do their work themselves. So you have, but they will have to have should have an illusion that everything is under your control. What if I need to remember additional info? Let's say something that doesn't match policy or any read model. So in this case, you can just take any big sticky note, for example, a big yellow one, and just write something like, okay, so we have an order which is from 1 to n order lines, and each order line is 1 to m product lines. Just additional information. You can write it on the board as well. How to run event storming in my company? I can't. I don't have a question. I don't have an answer for you because I don't know your relationships with your managers and things like that. However, if I have had only one advice, I would suggest you to start small. Just take some very small, maybe surveys, maybe small business process, and practice there, and you will learn a lot after this. This is something that I did, and I was happy with that because then I could work on a bigger scope. When to stop event storming? It's really up to you. So when you just see that the value of additional session diminishes, then you just maybe don't need it. Don't need to proceed with this. Can I run event storming online? Yes, however, there are some caveats, like technical challenges. You know this, like oh, I can't hear you. Oh, my Microsoft or my microphone doesn't work, or maybe Teams is hanging or something like that. So it will be just harder for you to do it. Distractions and multitasking. Some colleagues will just bug you by writing some messages. You will be distracted. And in personal interactions as well, because as a facilitator, it will be just harder for you to understand the people's emotions when you're on a remote talk. So this is why I suggest to have event storming offline. However, if you can't, if your team is spread, maybe just they work in different countries with different time zones, so maybe there is only option for you to run it offline. But please be prepared to those issues. All right. So but what's next after event storming? Let's say we are done. We have all of this knowledge. So you can digitize it. You can just take pictures. You can convert it to Miro, or keep the paper version just hanging on the wall if you have this possibility. Document it in a place accessible to the team, and you can plan as well future technical related work, like system architecture, backlog with your user stories, things like that. So it's a very event storming is a very good starting point. Will you say anything about event storming and AI today? Not at this time. I didn't find anything useful at the moment. So, but if someone of you has anything to say, so please come to me after my talk and share your knowledge with me. Maybe you know how to convert pictures to the mirror board using AI. And in short words, what is event storming? So for me, event storming is the best starting point I can get. Is the best starting point I can get in hours. Thank you very much, and please rate my talk. All right, so we have some time, and I will just I will just try to duplicate my screen. Good. Questions? Do you have any advice for remote teams? Is event storming possible if the team cannot meet in person? Yeah. So this. Thank you for the question. This question was addressed. As I said, if you don't have any choice, do it. It will be anyways much more valuable just sitting in those boring meetings and trying to understand by yourself your business requirements, and end user behaviors, and figuring out what system architecture you will have, and so on. So you can find as well on the internet some examples of running EventStorming online. For example, as you remember, we had orange sticky notes for domain events. And when you run it in Miro, you need to somehow identify who will create which events. And in this case, you just create sticky notes. For example, if you're using Miro board, so you create sticky notes of different colors, and you assign a color to each person. So this is how when you ask, who created this sticky note? So is it duplicate, or what do you mean by that? So the color may help to remember who did that, and you will get the answer. For example, just using all orange sticky notes for everyone won't work in online session. This is, for example, one suggestion. Yeah. So if you don't have any choice, yes, do it. If you have possibilities, so maybe you can even invite that person and use the time in your office rather than meeting remotely. Maybe this person can just fly to you. As well, it will be much better than having online EventStorming session. Do you remember about 2 stories? I have 2 minutes. The first story was about my very first EventStorming, and we thought like, okay, let's try it out, let's run it for a very small project, but probably we won't have anything useful after that because everybody knows how it works. However, after 2.5 hours, we ended up with 10 hotspots, which means that there were 10 questions nobody could answer, and it was a kind of an eye-opener for me, like, oh, this actually works. And another story was related to one more EventStorming on a bigger scope. So we ran it, and after like a 3.5 hours, one part of the board was quite blurry. So I felt like I don't understand it. And then we decided to use 1 hour on the process modeling session, just another day, and just keep focus only on this part. We ran it for 1 hour, and then again, it was still blurry. I was thinking like, oh, maybe I'm, as a facilitator, doing something wrong, and all right, so maybe let's give it a try the very last time and use 1 hour more. And during the 3rd session, we got an idea that we don't need it, because someone just asked, but wait, we have 2 systems that can just take over and implement the business use case. So the conclusion was to abandon the project. Such a nice conclusion, right? Instead of sending 2 developers, or it was like 2 or 3 developers, just implementing this, and then realize that we actually didn't need that. That conclusion as well, like for me, it was real fun. Like, okay, so just in hours, we saved so much money for the company. Yeah, so that it was those like 2 stories. All right, so it's time for a break. Thank you very much.